Hello, my name is Marie Ricks. I'm a professional organizer, and we are here today to talk about some practices and some principles that will change your life forever. The name of our presentation today is the 10% Advantage. What we're trying to do in our home, personal, and family organization is come to a point where we refine our skills sufficiently that life is different and there is more time, specifically in our cases, to serve the Lord. Let's start today with a scripture. In the Doctrine and Covenants, in section 88, verse 19, the Lord commands us to organize ourselves and to prepare every needful thing. I believe that this commandment comes with many blessings that we'll talk about as we go through our presentation today, and that we should take it into our minds and our hearts as something that we can work on to become more proficient at until we feel really comfortable that being organized is the way that we want to go. The practical principles of today's presentation is that in any 24-hour period, there's a good 8 hours where we're hoping we got a good night's sleep last night, and then there are 16 hours with which to live our day. If you and I can get just 10% more organized, that's about 1.6 hours a day that we will be able to have for the Lord, for service, or for doing things that are important to us. That starts to add up very quickly. It's about 32 more days every year. We don't have to get 50% more organized or even 35% more organized. We simply have to think of the example of a door. If we move 2%, just a little tiny bit, 10%, at the hinge of the door, the whole door will swing a great deal. So come with me and we'll look at some principles that will change your life forever. This presentation today is part of a 3-session presentation that will talk about principles of organization. Today we're going to focus on chaotic to controlled and flustered to focus. So come with me and let's change everything for you and for me as we sit together and talk about some principles that will help make everything easier for you. The first principle that we're going to talk about in chaotic and controlled is how to clean out, clean up, and to organize our possessions. As a professional organizer, I have learned that most people can get rid of almost half of everything they own and they won't even miss it. We will also be talking today about disciplining our routines so they move into patterns of our life that move to the background of our life so that we can focus on the more chaotic, challenging things that are in front of our face. We will also work on the skill and the principle of doing some things the same every time, so that they become ingrained in us and we get quicker and quicker, more proficient, and more able to do those things without having to think very hard. Lastly, today we'll work about and strive for steady pacing. The capacity to become organized in these 4 ways will change many things for you for the better. So let's learn about the lesson of the peach jar. When I was a young girl, my mother canned peaches. As you know, a peach is a cupped sort of fruit. You slice it in half and you end up with 2 cups. If you take those cups fruit and you just drop them in a peach jar, you will get the peach jar full. You'll add your water and your sugar and you'll can your peaches, but you won't get a lot of peaches in the peach jar. However, if you use a pronged meat fork and you take the peaches and as you're putting them in the peach jar, you cup them one over the other carefully in the jar, you will get about 30% more peaches in any peach jar. What this affects is that you will get more peaches in less space. You will be able to feed more people with less space, and everything is different than it has been before. My point being, I'd like you to consider and open your mind and your heart for a few minutes to maybe some different ways to think about organization. Let's think of some creative ways to think about organization. And then let's think about what might be the best way to do different organizational challenges that you are facing in your life. So the final question is, what is going to be my way of canning peaches, of getting dishes done, of doing the laundry, of being able to run a house, a business, our family, a ward, or a stake? Let's start at the beginning by learning about reducing by half. When we clean out and clean up our personal possessions, we find that there are many things that can happen. We have far less to clean, far less to pick up, and far less to worry about. For a minute, let's talk about the principles of how we know what to keep, what to share, and what to throw away. The things that we want to keep of our personal possession are things that are both useful and needed. Things that we want to share are things that are useful, but we don't need them in this season of our life. Things that we want to discard or recycle are things that are neither useful or they're not needed. Let's use some practical examples of the supplies we'll need as we start this project. Let's say that you and I are having a personal session together and we are working together to clean up and clean out. We're going to buy some black bags. In those black bags, we're going to put items that we want to share. This will help us not to cheat. It's always hard to put something in the black bag. It's always easy to take it back out. We're also going to collect some boxes. Because we start organizing, we're going to find that there's some things that we do want to keep, but they don't particularly belong in the room where we want to organize. We're going to have a wastebasket for the little things that we find, like mice tails and pins and rubber bands and crayons that we really don't need to keep and we can discard immediately. We're also going to purchase some white bags. In the white bags is where we're going to put things that we're going to throw away. So black bags is for donation. Boxes are for things that we need to keep but put elsewhere. Garbage can is for things we can immediately discard. And then the white bags are things that we're going to want to discard, wholesale or recycle. So let's say you and I looked in your closet and we focused first on t-shirts. We would find that you have 6 t-shirts that you've got folded in your drawers. You've got some t-shirts hanging on your rod in your closet, and you have one very special t-shirt that you've absolutely never worn but is very precious to you. As you and I work together and work towards getting rid of half of everything you own, we decide that we're going to keep 3 of the t-shirts. They're going back in your closet because you love them, the colors are very nice looking on you, and they fit you really well. We're going to put away 3 more of those t-shirts because they're a little bit heavier. Some of them have long sleeves, and it's the wrong season for them to be in your closet. We're going to share and discard all those t-shirts that are the same that you're keeping to use for paint jobs and for yard work, but you never really liked them. They really don't fit, and they've just been sitting in your closet. And then we're going to take that special t-shirt with that logo, and you know, it's got 2 holes under the underarms, and we're going to discard it. So the keep t-shirts we're going to return to our closet in a manner that allows them to be color coordinated so we can easily see them. We're going to take the 3 t-shirts that we're going to store, and we're going to put them in labeled boxes or plastic containers. You'll notice here that I have 2 labels for you to put on the boxes that talk about girls' tops and girls' bottoms. As a professional organizer, I have found that if you have a family, you usually need to keep 1 box about the size of a Xerox paper box of tops and bottoms for each child for each year. You'll have a separate box for shoes and another box for underwear. If you have enough space and you want to have all of your stored boxes with clothes accessible, you might begin to store them along a wall in the diagram here. In other words, there is not a box in this diagram that is not completely available. Of course, if you only have a few boxes, you'll just line them across the wall and be able to access them. But remember to label both on the side and on the end of each box. The other t-shirts, the ones that you're going to donate, you're going to put in a white bag. Not fair to cheat, easy to do. Sometimes when I work with clients, I'm actually the one that drives away from the house with the bags in my car to head towards the thrift store because it's really hard not to get back in those bags and want to put the items back in your closet. So remember, the things that we are sharing are still useful, but they're not needed in our life anymore. Things that we are going to discard or recycle are those things that are no longer useful and no longer needed. We're going to put them in white bags and either put them in the recycle garbage can or in the trash can, depending upon our culture, our situation, and our location. Brothers and sisters, I cannot overemphasize the liberality that will come into your life as you carefully and completely decide to divide half of everything you own and give it back to the Lord for His use at a thrift store. And then allow Him to be able to help those that are in need come to those same thrift stores and be able to get the things that you need. Also remember that giving away things that are perfectly good is the highest form of consecration. The Lord really doesn't need things that are broken or sit in your garage for 20 years before you get the courage to pass them on. I encourage you to consider this as you think about the possessions that you own. Lastly, you don't need to wait to share what you own for someone that's worthy of it. Just give it back to the Lord, get it back out where it can be useful, and pass it on. Let's move now to the next principle about moving your life from chaotic to controlled. We want to work on disciplining some of our routines into strong personal patterns. When I work with clients, I help them understand that there are 5 things that are foundational for them to be personally organized, usually in the morning. The first is we want to move our body, and so we set a disciplined pattern of exercising. And we can make some commitments. You'll notice here on the slide that we're going to exercise at such and such a time, on so many days, and the next day for a certain period of time. Initially, I try to help my clients see that moving their body is foundational for them to have happiness and to organize the rest of their life. Because when we exercise, we're able to organize our brain because we give it time to think about priorities, practices, and skills that we need to work on. Second, I cannot overemphasize the power of revelation in helping us organize our life. The Lord speaks of organization here and there throughout the Scriptures. He speaks about it with commandment. He speaks about it with promises. And if we strive to live as He has asked us to live and to order our private lives, if we pray about it, if we read about it in the Scriptures, and if we write about our progress in our journal, you will find that the Lord incrementally will be able to help you get more organized and help you move to that place where you definitely can take care of the 10% advantage. And lastly, I encourage you at the beginning of your day to make yourself attractive for the day. This means moving out of our pajamas, getting a shower, combing our hair, making ourselves attractive for those that we are around most, our families, then to work, or then to social activities, church commitments. These 5 foundational patterns that we set in the morning make the biggest difference. Now, you and I obviously love a Saturday where we stay in our pajamas till noon and we eat popcorn for breakfast, and on holidays when we lounge around. But on our everyday lives, I encourage you to incorporate the routines that you're striving for into strong patterns of organization, exercise, prayer, scriptures, journaling, and making yourself attractive for the day. Now, on the bad days, exercising is running up and down the stairs twice. Prayer lasts for 3 minutes, scripture reading is 1 verse, and journaling says, I'm still alive, gotta go. Being attractive is putting jewelry over the top of your pajamas and getting to that Zoom meeting. But as you get better at it, you'll find that these 5 habits will make a great deal of difference in ordering your private life and setting the stage for a more organized life. The next principle we want to talk about is learning to do some things the same every time. When the mail comes into your house, it's important that there's a strong routine of being able to get the mail where it needs to go once it enters your home. What we don't want to have happen is that the mail gets put down on a counter, and by the end of the day it's slimed across the counter. By the next day, it's sliding off the counter and being played with by the children, and by the 3rd day, it's been cut up by the children and you can't find the bill that you need to pay or the check that you were waiting to get in the mail. All mail needs a home. I encourage you to have a place where your mail goes so that each member of your family who is receiving mail will be able to get it and process it and move it forward. What we're trying to do with paperwork is each time we touch it, we are trying to move it forward to its designated home, whether that is a filing cabinet in our home, sending it on to somebody else for processing, or getting it back in the trash. I also encourage you to simplify and clarify your payment of bills. There's nothing quite so frustrating as receiving a second notice because a bill has gone unpaid. Sometimes this happens inadvertently, and sometimes it happens just because we don't have really strong, organized habits for getting those bills paid. If you'll take a look at your systems for getting bills paid, what happens when it comes in the mail or you get a notice online, and simplify and clarify that, you will find that you will gain that little 10% organizational advantage that we've been talking about. Lastly, if a paper is important, I encourage you to set up a filing system that works for you. There are 3 kinds of filing systems that people find most effective. Some people think numerically, and so their filing system works with numbers. Other people work better with the alphabet, and so their filing system works with words. And some people are definitely color coordinated. There's blue items and yellow items and red items and green items. It doesn't matter so much what kind of a filing system you have, as that you choose a system that works well for you, and you finish getting the paper where it needs to go if it needs to be filed. Now, 2 side comments about filing things. The first is that all magazines only need to live in your house until the new magazine comes. There is no magic carpet to heaven by having a lot of Liahonas and Children's Friends sitting in your house. When the new Liahona comes in, the old Liahona magazine should go out, because this month you're not likely to have twice as much time to read the Liahona as you had last month. So what we're wanting to do is to move things through your life so that the only things that are in your life, especially with paperwork, are things in the present. Secondly, all the handouts that you've received from different meetings that you have attended really don't need to live in your house. Everything that you need for the lesson you're going to teach next week or next month or 2 years from now, probably that information is online. And so storing that paper is no longer necessary because we live in a different world than we used to. Finally, I encourage you to look around your house, walk around your house, and say, does every piece of paper that comes in my home have a place to land, have a home to live in, while I am able to do other things and then get to be able to process that? Here are some of the tools that really help when you're trying to deal with bills and paperwork and filing. You'll want some writing utensils, specifically because some pieces of paper will be time delimited, which means that you will be able to get rid of them after a certain period. For instance, recently I did a raised bed garden, did quite a bit of research, printed out some information about sides and corners and soil and seeds and etc. But I'm not going to need that information long term. So I clipped it together and made a big red note on it that says, you may discard after September 2023. And then I put it in a filing system, which we call a tickler system. A tickler system is 12 folders that have all the months of the year, and then 10 folders for the next 10 years. Because I was going to keep that paperwork for my garden until 2023, I could put it in the folder that was listed as 2023. Other pieces of paper you might want to review in 6 months, or you can discard it in 3 years from now. What this does is it allows every piece of paper to have a place where you will review it at some future time. Please make sure that the folders that you purchase are of high quality, because folders can last a long time. You probably will also need some in and out letter trays. This allows you to stack some trays for every member of your current family and have a home for paperwork. If an assignment comes home from your teenager and you're supposed to sign it saying that he spent so many hours doing it, the piece of paper goes from his slot to your slot for you to sign it. And then after you've signed it, you put it back in his slot. This allows the paper to always have a home and to never get lost. And lastly, you'll need some sort of a filing container. It might be a rolling container as we see on this slide. It might be a small filing container that you put on your desk. Or if you have a little bit more money, it might actually be a filing cabinet. But remember, if you put a piece of paper in a filing cabinet, it's likely to live there for 40 years or more. So you probably want to make sure it's something you want to keep that long. Let's talk for a minute about steady pacing. The capacity to move things through your life at a steady pace is a skill that we can all work for. Remember, what we're trying to do is shave things down by just 10%. We're trying to save time on a 20-second project just by 2 seconds, a 20-minute project just by 2 minutes. And so these principles that we're going to talk about with regards to pacing are very, very useful for helping you become more proficient in your personal life, your home life, your business life, and even in your church service. The first principle is is that where you live, there should be a launch pad and a landing pad. A launch pad is where you put things that are ready to leave your house. For instance, if you have a piece of sheet music that needs to go back to Sister Jones because you borrowed it this week to learn a choral piece, but it belongs in the music library at the church, you would put it in the launch pad. The landing pad is where you'll put some fabric that you purchased but aren't going to get to for the project right away, and so it goes there just temporarily. Or the gift that you bought but you need to wrap. That would go in your landing pad. Having a designated place for things that temporarily live at your house before they go to their permanent home or get moved on to someplace else makes it possible for you to stay organized and not have bags and boxes and paperwork everywhere around your house with not a clear idea about whether it's going to get launched or landed. Second, in your calendar, I encourage you to separate and have time for launching and also time for landing. Recently, I was in charge of a large family reunion. My launching time for that family reunion, of course, included my private preparations, but I also saved several days before the reunion without other commitments so that I could deal with the last-minute needs of the reunion. And of course, when I came home from the reunion, I allowed almost 3 weeks of rest, or until I came to Education Week. In reality, I really only had about 3 hours of landing time. But it was an important 3 hours because by giving myself this space, I was able to pace my energy outgo and was more resilient to deal with some of the challenges that came into my world at those times. So think about these 3 things. Where can I put a launch pad and a landing pad where I live, where I work, and as part of my church service? And how can I change my calendar to give sufficient time for launching and sufficient time for landing so that I can continue to have steady pacing? I also encourage you to have something that I call the someday cupboard. Many times we purchase things because we want to become involved with a new project, a new hobby, or we want to do something with our kids, our spouse, or maybe our parents. But as we have acquired that and we still want to keep the tools, we'll find that it's not the season for us to do that. So we designate what is called the someday cupboard. We put aside the tools or the project or the materials for that project into a special cupboard, and then we don't have to worry about it. But in the meantime, it has a home where it can live. Let's kind of shift our schedule and our mind a little bit from chaotic and controlled to flustered and focused. We are going to work now on skills that will help us magnify our stewardships personally, with our spouse, with our family, and with our church calling. And some things that will make a big difference. Remember, we're just trying to get 10% more organized to gain that 90 minutes that we'll get every day for the rest of our lives. The 3 principles that we want to talk about next are filtering and funneling, learning to always be early wherever we go, and to never go anywhere without being more fully prepared. Let's talk about the principle of filtering and funneling. Being able to look ahead and make decisions is an essential part of being a member of our church. We have been taught that not only should we be doing good things, but we should be doing the best things. This usually means that we have to say no to some things in order to say yes to some other things. And it also means that instead of feeling overwhelmed because there's just so many things going at us, we're able to filter and funnel the requests that are on the demands of our time to things that feel like they're priorities and feel like they're the Lord's will, so that we can stay focused in a way that will allow us to be of the most use at any one time. As we talk about this today, the first thing we have to do is kind of think about what our goals should be in this season of our life. And then we're going to filter through those potential options, and then we're going to define some priorities which will allow us to funnel our energy and our time and our commitment in a way that works. Let's use some examples that might be useful to you. As we do this funneling to activities, what happens is we gain energy and we feel very comfortable that what we're doing will help. Let's say that we are really dreaming big as you and I visit with each other, and we've decided we want to save the world. We want to serve the needy. We want to feed the hungry. We're going to clothe the naked, and we want to educate the ignorant. Can you feel how nebulous and overwhelming that is? Now let's funnel and filter. We are going to decide just on that first item. Remember when we were back here, that first item was save the world? Now we're going to funnel and filter downward. We're going to decide, possibly as an idea in saving the world, that we're going to focus on ministering as brethren and sisters. So if you're married, you might motivate your spouse or focus yourself on your own stewardship. We're going to volunteer maybe at the Family History Library or get in front of a computer and do family history ourselves. And we've had a long-term interest in volunteering in a literacy program, and so we're going to investigate that a little bit. Now, by moving from the big goal to some specific activities, what is happening is we're able to filter and focus our energies and be getting more specific. But we need to do one more thing. We have to set priorities. We have to decide what's most important, what's next most important, what might be third important, and maybe some things that we'll have to save for later, kind of like the someday cupboard. This will be a someday project, being a literacy volunteer. Then we have to decide if we're going to focus on ministering as part of our goal to save the world, and decide when we're going to prioritize and focus on that particular activity. In this case, I suggest that ministering should always be part of your goal set on the first week of every month. Then you can think maybe about going to the temple the second week of the month. Don't tell anybody though, because I found out if nobody knows you're going, except for maybe people you're taking, you're more likely to get there. Third, we may decide that feeding hungry for us at this time of our life will be having a generous fast offering. And we'll take care of that the first week of every month because we'll remember because we're hungry ourselves. And then lastly, we're going to choose to clothe the naked by donating to charities and continue to clean out our personal possessions on a quarterly basis. Educating the ignorant is a very important thing for us. And when we get a bonus, or we have an education savings account and put a little bit away, we're going to wait for the bonus check in order to focus on that. Brothers and sisters, can you see how when you filter and focus, you take very nebulous but very worthy goals and you move them downward and inward until you're able to make them work for you in your season of your life? There was a time in my life when family history meant putting the picture of an ancestor on the refrigerator for a month. It was enough for me to teach my family that we had ancestors and to give ancestors a face and a name and a time period. Of course, in a different season of your life, you might be very involved in family history work and temple work in a different sort of way. Let's move on now to another principle that will change your life and allow you to be able to gain that 10% that you're really working for. Being early everywhere you go will give you an advantage, sometimes much more than the 10% advantage that we're working for. You will never be late if you always plan to be 5 minutes early. And if it's an important event, big date with a girl that you like, or someone you hope to marry someday, or maybe even meeting the state president for the first time, you probably want to be 10 or 15 minutes early. Work on this if it's a particular challenge for you, because so much business is done for those that show up early. So much advantage is gained for those that are anywhere early. I encourage you to reset your clocks if necessary 3 minutes or 5 minutes early so that life becomes a time when you have the advantage of being early. Second, as you're planning to go anywhere, I encourage you to allow more launching time. So many of us get caught up in, I'll just do one more thing before I leave. I'll just do one more thing before I leave. And so we are always arriving in the sliver of the time, anxious, frustrated, and often, well, quite frankly, a little bit grumpy. Third, I encourage you to always pre-pack your vehicle so that you don't have to think when it's time to leave. The thing that we know as I have worked with my clients is that the closer it gets to the time to leave, the less your brain works. It works much better, much earlier. So pre-pack that vehicle much earlier before it's time to leave. And then plan backwards. If I want to be to church for 5 minutes early, and I allow 20 minutes for my youngster and 15 minutes each for my truant school-age children, and 5 minutes for my husband, when do I need to start to get ready? And work to balance and fine-tune so that your whole family can arrive at church 5 minutes early. Or you can come in your meeting to the bishop and be 10 minutes early. Or when you have a social event, you can be at the bridal shower or the baby shower just right on time for a good time. I encourage you, especially in your church callings, to come prepared to any meeting with the things that you would like to discuss, the questions that you have, and a form that you've completed to show how much work you've done. You'll notice on this slide that this is an activity form that can be prepared to give you a theme, the date, the time, the assignments, the meals, who will do what, the cleanup. When we have all that kind of information in one place, everything becomes easier because everything has a boundary, and we know when we're finished preparing who we maybe need to call, and the information is very easy for us to work. Second, I encourage you to go to meetings with assignments that you've completed, with subjects that you need to address, and with questions that you need to ask. This helps make any meeting that you might have in a calling much more concise and allows you to be more effective. And remember, it's this effectiveness that gives you the 10% advantage. Brothers and sisters, it's been very wonderful to share a little bit of time with you and share some of the principles that make a lot of difference as you try to get more organized. Remember, what we're working towards is to get, be, and stay organized. We want to do this with just a little bit of tweaking in our already very skillful life so that we have that 10% advantage. 10% here, 10% there will get you 90 minutes every day for the rest of your life, which is almost 32 days every year. May the Lord bless you to find this organized self that is inside of you and to work on it as chaos surrounds your life so that you can always be working to move from disordered to an ordered life. I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.